Okay, this is a brief video response. Actually, it speaks in a predictive manner, unusual for people who actually teach the Bible, but a predictive forecast based on what we know. Hermeneutics, for example. What's the relationship with IAmKOINE and hermeneutics? Well, we study the science of interpretation, and that's why the content of the website, the Apologetics and Outreach, contains things that would otherwise be omitted, overlooked. But what can we see in the future? For example, a Supreme Court justice. What would IAmKOINE, hermeneutics, and Christians and the Bible, for example, have to do with the future that we can predict in relationship to the Supreme Court? Since we don't need to speak politically, for example, and we don't have any desire to speak politically, that is in this particular video, just review something and then let's consider it. Hermeneutics, for example, an originalist, which is what we are at IAmKOINE.org. It's what everyone is who studies the Bible. But it says an originalist is a person who believes that the meaning of the Bible, and in this context the Constitution, does not change or evolve over time, but rather that the meaning of the text is both fixed and knowable. An originalist believes that the fixed meaning of the text should be the sole guide for a judge and or a Bible interpreter when applying or interpreting a constitutional provision or a Bible passage. Now it moves on. A textualist is an originalist who gives primary weight to the text and structure of the Bible, or in this particular instance, the Constitution of the United States. The text means what it would have been understood to mean by an ordinary person at the time it was written. Textualists often are skeptical of the ability of judges, or as we at Koine are skeptical of the ability of religionists, to determine collective intent. Justice Scalia was a textualist, and it was interesting that in the wake of the passing of Justice Scalia, horrific remarks were made by some people, even celebratory remarks, and it makes us wonder, well, what is behind that now we have a Supreme Court hanging in the balance, 4-4. Well, let's read here something about postmodernity. You can get a book, Is There Meaning in the Text? Is There Meaning in the Text? It's a good book. Here's a book I used when I was in undergraduate interpreting the Bible. Here we go, if I can find the lens. There we go, interpreting the Bible. And it's really good because it makes a statement that etymology is the science of tracing the meaning of a word back to its root. The etymologist asks, what did this particular word mean in its earliest form? And that's a really good textbook. This textbook, studied it in graduate school and seminary, hermeneutics, and that's a big deal. This one was one of our textbooks at UCA, University of Central Arkansas, and it was a good book. Interesting though, can we predict what happens in the demise of a particular person, let's say a textualist, when he's out of the way finally? Can we predict, well, for example, let's see right here. It says deconstruction, which is what happens to people who oppose textualists, who do not wish to adhere to what the text meant at the time. Let's say it was prepared, written, how did it originally communicate? Because in the Bible, for example, the biblical Hebrew is a dead, static, unchanging language, and the Koine Greek text is a dead, static, unchanging. That is, that language is now fixed and will never be any different than the next time someone learns to study it and look it up. But this says that the idea that the author was essential to textual meaning, even though his identity might be contested, says for the postmodern literary critic, however, the author's voice is undecidable and therefore indecipherable. There is no presence that can fix or halt the play of possible textual meanings. Well, what happens is these people that say that unless we can speak with the author himself, and if that is lost, then forever what he meant is lost, saying that the text itself has no authority, saying that intent alone of the author. Well, the undoers effectively strip the Bible of any stable meaning so that it cannot state a fact, issue a command, or make a promise. It says, without the author to serve as touchstone of the distinction between meaning and significance, every interpretation becomes just as authorized a version as another. Actually, it's almost celebratory when postmodernists, as they're called, which really don't know why that doesn't communicate well, they just are not textualist. They find imaginary reinterpretations. So what's the big deal? Well, if you notice, how could someone have spoken so harshly or cruel time to speak about a person's death? One person celebrating said it was good timing that Justice Scalia happened to die when he did, because it opened up a window of something they were trying to legislate. So when we talk about politics, really that's an irrelevant matter because no one knows what's at stake when we talk that way. People talk about social programs, health programs. It really comes down to what everything comes down to. Religion, man's religions have no interest in the original text. They are not originalists, they are not textualists. They despise people who are originalists, who are textualists. Just the feedback alone to IAmKOINE.org will let you know even people that say they are Christians, even some who quote misuse the word Baptist, have been some of the leading voices in ridiculing what can be known. And so when people say you can't know something, that's what they know. They advocate ignorance. But what is at stake what can we forecast and predict in the future should people be so distracted by, I guess, the clutter, commentary and sensationalism? Well, what's at stake is the same thing when a presidential candidate was running as a particular conservative group, and his opponent said, watch out for him, he's a strict constructionist. And that was now, probably 16 years ago, 12 or 16. But what went unheard by the audience was that let's say the more liberal person was saying, watch out, he's a strict constructionist. He was actually sending out a buzzword, letting them know that now he will follow the Constitution, he will uphold the inalienable rights as spelled out in the Bills of Rights, he will recognize the three branches of government, legislative and the judicial, and then of course the executive, that he would not support collective intent, to which he would always remain skeptical. So if there's any alarm approaching us that we can forecast, is as people treat people of faith who are originalist and textualist, no doubt they are revealing how they will vote in the future. And how they vote in the future you can already predict. If they despise someone for studying the original text, they despise someone for being an originalist or a textualist, then no matter what they say openly, and when they're quiet around people in political conversations, you'll know that this is why people become elected officials, and sometimes people in America just step back and are aghast. How can someone who doesn't recognize the value of the original Constitution, the original text, what we can know was meant in that text as it was written, and what it meant to the ordinary people at the time it was received, well, how they speak of that is how they actually vote, which answers what goes on in that voting booth and closet. I've had several people say, well, what is it with a country that believes, so many people believe in God, so many people tout the Bible, thump the Bible? Well, they don't mean what you think they mean. They mean they're glad he's up there, they're glad the Bible's on the nightstand next to Grandma's bed, but don't allow any of those things to interfere with my life. They don't want to go, let's say, a church is an assembly, called out body of baptized believers who have actually agreed together for the purpose of carrying out the Great Commission. Now, in a church, there is no such thing as preferring collective intent or what's the trend doing today, in which direction, and what's the new trend. We are happy to evaluate everything. When you read our Declaration of Faith, I think it originally was the New Hampshire Declaration, it says that everything will be tried by the Bible. Well, it doesn't mean it'll all be negated. The fact that we evaluate doesn't mean we negate. That's ridiculous, because there's only one thing that's the Bible. So everything else is fallible. But we've been receiving some unusual feedback from people who say they're Calvinists, but then they're angered because of what we disclose the text to actually say, or exposit what it says. People who say that they're Arminian, but are angered because they liked what we disclosed or exposited that was going against their Calvinist adversary, but then they didn't like what we exposited or exposed that was not in favor of their Arminianism. We've had more Baptists than I ever imagined would even openly. I thought at least they'd had the wisdom to not put it in writing, and especially not say it, but just almost act as though something was unusual about people being originalists and textualists. And I thought, well, it seemed that many people in our nation mourn the loss of Justice Scalia. Many people were implying that there's something at stake in the future, and then I thought, well, if there is, in the judicial system, by the mishandling of the Constitution or by the right handling, if there is something at stake, then you'd certainly think it would be a consistent view that there's something at stake when the Bible's mishandled. So if IAmKOINE and hermeneutics and apologetics have anything to say about what we can predict in the future, is that the culture that celebrates the passing of an originalist, a textualist, the culture that appreciates getting this Constitution out of our way so we can get on with whatever it is, it's only a culture that is looking to do unto others first before they can do unto them. It is a expression of social Darwinianism. Let's have the survival of the fittest, and let's keep bringing out larger and larger divisions and increasing a greater expanse between those that have and those that have not. More people can then be abused, more people can become impoverished. And this is just like religion. The fewer at the top give themselves more and more control over people. Clergy view their people, they even call them that, their people, our people, the laity. They're a commodity. They're there to be used up. The Bible spoke of the Pharisees and Sadducees, and spoke of them in a prophecy in Ezekiel where God said, I will go and shepherd my people myself. He will tend to us, and He will care for us. He will tell us the truth. He gives us green grass, still waters, not a flummox. And again, in Christianity, there's no such thing as a sacred cow. We have a lamb, the lamb from God, blemish-free, spotless, sinless lamb, but no sacred cow. So whatever it is that's causing people to push back against originalist and textualist in religion, it's the same thing that causes people to push back in politics. So politics and religion are partisan intentionally. They push back and resist something that's very powerful, and it's originalist and textualist because we have the character to assure that the original intent and meaning is always included in the conversation. Never do we superimpose it. We don't have to. Someone said, how do you get people to believe these things that you study? We don't have to. Once we study it, disclose it, and proclaim it, we have done everything that there is to be done. It's an ironic thing when you hear someone say, well, how will you get someone to ever believe that? Someone asked me, well, how many people believe like you do? And I'm thinking, well, there's not many Justice Scalias out there, but I never thought that his value would be appraised according to how many are out there, except now when it matters, it appears that people are saying, we want to find an originalist, a textualist like Scalia to place onto the Supreme Court. Well, that's who God places in His churches as pastors too, by the way. So if you ever run into someone who is not an originalist, that's not a textualist, that becomes angered or emotive and outrageous over the implications of the teachings of an originalist or a textualist, you're looking at the same type of person who's the reason why in this country people cannot figure out how is it that the people say one thing, but the elections always lead to something totally opposite. So whatever's happening in the future is what's happening now. People are celebrating the absence of a man like Scalia, because you get rid of the originalists, you get rid of the Constitution. You rid yourself of the Constitution, there is no text. Similar to the Bible. Take the Bible out, then observing Jesus' teachings, it's irrelevant. No one has to do what he says, and he's no longer Lord. Church has just become a gathering to hear something according to the pop culture of the day, and then the same people in that pop religion will outwardly say, well, we really regret what's going on in our country. No, they don't. They're happy to have the constraints removed in the political arena, as well as they break those bans in the religious arena. So that's what IAmKOINE hermeneutics have to do with Supreme Court. I've met a lot of people say they're a lawyer, they went to law school, but the person doesn't seem to have any corresponding integrity. I am thankful for the lawyers I know who are originalists and textualists, because anything else is an inventive, it's an innovation or imaginary reinterpretation that floats upon the lily pad of illusions, I suppose. But that's enough of that. This is enough to explain if there's anything going on in our upcoming election. It's a contrast between the text and the talk, and the talkers do not want the text. It interferes, whether it be the Constitution or the Bible. God bless you.